You're with ABC News. It's 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 6 a.m. in the West. Leading our bulletin this hour, US President Donald Trump says the military operation in Iran is proceeding ahead of schedule and will continue until all objectives have been achieved. The Pentagon has confirmed 3 US troops have been killed as retaliatory attacks intensify across the region. We'll get the latest on this rapidly evolving situation from our Middle East correspondent, and we'll cross live to Washington and Canberra in a moment. Now, the killing of Iran's supreme leader has created a power vacuum and plunged the country's future into uncertainty. The White House says top officials in Iran are open to talks with the US. Around 115,000 Australians are stranded in the conflict zone. Foreign Minister Penny Wong says the government is waiting to see if commercial flights resume before considering repatriations. Also ahead, last month's interest rate rise has failed to slow much of Australia's housing market. New data shows property prices in mid-sized capital cities are still on the rise. And the Matildas kick off their Asian Cup campaign in style, with Sam Kerr slotting the winning goal against the Philippines at Perth Stadium. It is Monday, the 2nd of March. I'm Gemma Veness from the land of the Darug people in Parramatta in Western Sydney. And this is ABC News Mornings. US President Donald Trump says combat operations in Iran will continue until all objectives are achieved, as the US and Israel continue trading blows with Iran. In the less than 48 hours since the US-led operation began, there's been the first confirmation of casualties of American troops, as well as deaths in Israel and rising casualties in Iran. Iran has struck 3 US and UK oil tankers near the Strait of Hormuz and is warning against ships using the trade passage. In Israel, 9 people in the town of Beit Shemesh have been killed in an Iranian missile strike. Emerging pro-Iranian groups are targeting US bases in the Middle East, most recently in northern Iraq near Erbil Airport. The US has stepped up its assault on Iranian military strongholds, deploying B-2 stealth bombers to strike underground missile facilities and naval headquarters. The President, Donald Trump, claims 9 Iranian warships have been destroyed and sunk. The first US casualties in the war have been confirmed. 3 US service members have been killed and 5 are seriously wounded. It's not yet known when or where the troops died.
We pray for the full recovery of the wounded and send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. But America will avenge their deaths and deliver the most punishing blow to the terrorists who have waged war against, basically, civilization.
Iranian authorities say more than 200 people have been killed, including the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and other senior leaders. Iran's foreign minister says a transition council has already been established to elect a new leader.
The process of election of the new leader by the Assembly of Experts would be started. I assume that it takes a short period of time, maybe in 1 or 2 days, they will elect a new leader for the country, inshallah. This assassination would make this confrontation more complicated and even more dangerous.
Our North America correspondent Cayman Gok joins us now from Washington. Cayman, the President has just posted a video address online. What did he have to say?
President Donald Trump declared that the entire Iranian military command was gone and that many now want to surrender. Earlier in the day, he told a news outlet nearly 50 members of Iran's leadership had been killed in this operation. He said that the United States has hit hundreds of targets so far, including Revolutionary Guard buildings, missile defence systems, naval ships and submarines. And he stressed once again that Iran cannot have long-range missiles or nuclear weapons. He once again urged those in the Iranian regime and military to lay down their arms or otherwise face certain death. Now, he told one outlet earlier today that those who are still alive in the Iranian regime have reached out to him and want to talk. And he says that he has agreed to talk but refused to give a timeline of when those discussions may take place. He also said that the United States would not stop until all its objectives had been accomplished. And again, he'd reached out to another or spoken to another media outlet earlier today and suggested that this operation could go for about 4 weeks. He said the process was always going to be around 4 weeks. If that's true, then there is a rough timeline of US involvement and strikes, potential strikes in Iran for a month. Here is what President Trump had to say in this pre-recorded message.
For almost 50 years, these wicked extremists have been attacking the United States while chanting the slogan, "Death to America" or "Death to Israel," or both. They are the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. We are the world's greatest and most powerful nation, so we can do something about what they do.
Cayman, we've now seen the first US service member deaths in the conflict. What's been the reaction to that?
President Trump addressed those deaths in this pre-recorded message, and he said that they were true patriots and that America would avenge their deaths. Now, these are the first deaths to occur since President Trump returned to the Oval Office that have been involved in a major military operation. He said that likely there will be more deaths to come, and that's significant because whilst there's sorrow and sadness right now, if there are more deaths, that will lead to more anger and more pressure on this president, a man who campaigned for years about getting the United States out of the regime change and nation-building game. Now, in a matter of weeks this year, he's been involved in 2 leadership changes in 2 different countries. The difference with Venezuela, though, was that there were no American casualties. Now there are 3 Americans dead, he says likely more, and at least 5 others seriously wounded. That is significant, and it's led to Democrats and also members of the MAGA party, the MAGA base, angry. They believe that this is not necessarily America first, and they've questioned whether these strikes were out of necessity or rather opportunity. Here is Democrat Senator Mark Warner.
There was no imminent threat to America. So what are his goals? He owes it to not only the families of those 3 deceased service members, there will unfortunately probably be more.
And Cayman, do we know what happens next?
No, that remains unclear, and that's the question everyone would like a definitive answer on. And even if you ask Republicans, there is mixed answers. One Republican senator today on local media said there's no simple answer, while another said that's not the United States' problem, and said that they don't buy into the idea of you break it, you fix it, and said that the United States has successfully killed the Ayatollah, a man who harmed Americans for decades, and he said that's a win. Now, Democrats are warning, and many analysts, that if there is no what's next phase, that can destabilise the region further and may actually end up in a worse outcome, because that leads to a leadership vacuum, and whoever fills that vacuum, there's no guarantee they will be kinder or willing to work with the United States, and in fact may hold more animosity towards America, given the fact they've just struck the country hundreds of times. It also could mean that someone could take that role and be more cruel to the Iranian people. Now, President Trump himself, he's calling again on the Iranian civilians and citizens to rise up. Take a listen.
I call upon all Iranian patriots who yearn for freedom to seize this moment, to be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you. I made a promise to you, and I fulfilled that promise. The rest will be up to you, but we'll be there to help.
Now, that may prove difficult given the majority of the civilian population is unarmed, and even if the regime's leadership has been decapitated, they are an armed, structured organisation. Now, there have been celebrations by much of the Iranian diaspora around the world, especially in America, celebrating the death of Khamenei, a man who crushed dissent and often killed people who opposed him. But here in America, for many Americans, there is no united front on this. There is much division. In fact, the most recent Reuters Ipsos polls found only 1 in 4 Americans supported these strikes on Iran. So what happens next won't just shape the future of Iran and the Middle East, but it could also shape the future of domestic politics here in the United States.
North America correspondent Cayman Gok with the latest there from Washington. Thank you. Now, Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran is on the ground for us in Tel Aviv following developments.
Fresh waves of Iranian missiles have continued to be launched at Israel, sending millions of people scrambling for shelters across the country. In the last short while, we have seen a missile hit in the northern reaches of Jerusalem, in occupied East Jerusalem to be exact, the area of Ramat Shlomo, where a missile appears to have hit a main road there, hitting a car, causing a significant crater and throwing debris across a vast area. Paramedics they're treating people on the scene in what is the most significant hit in Jerusalem since this conflict began on Saturday morning local time. We have also seen a missile hit a bomb shelter under a synagogue in the city of Bet Shemesh. That's around 20 to 25 kilometres away from Jerusalem, about a third of the distance between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. 9 people are so far confirmed dead. That is the figure before midnight local time, but we have also seen reports that more than 40 have been injured, and a search is still underway through the rubble for people who are unaccounted for. They are the most significant strikes so far on Israel since this conflict began. A woman in Tel Aviv also losing her life on Saturday night when a missile hit a residential building there. In response to that, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised that Israeli attacks on Iran will continue and they will also increase in their intensity. His office released a statement of him speaking to the nation from the roof of the Kiryat, the Israel Defense Forces headquarters in central Tel Aviv.
Yesterday, we eliminated the tyrant Khamenei. Together with him, we eliminated dozens of senior officials in the regime of oppression. Our forces are now striking in the heart of Tehran with growing intensity, and this will only increase in the coming days. However, these are painful days. Yesterday, here in Tel Aviv, and now in Beit Shemesh, we lost dear people.
Benjamin Netanyahu is clearly speaking there about the now slain supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed in strikes on Saturday when missiles were launched at his compound in the capital, Tehran. That confirmation coming from Donald Trump in the form of a post on social media, his preferred platform of choice, but also confirmed on Iranian state television. We know that also senior members of the Iranian establishment have also been killed, more than 40 different defense officials, others within the higher echelons of the Iranian regime who have been killed during these strikes from Israel and the United States. Clearly there is speculation that there is something of a power vacuum at the top of the Iranian regime, but officials are trying to quell any of those concerns, including in this appearance from the Iranian president who spoke to the media in Iran earlier today.
The United States and Israel should know that this will bring them nothing but shame. Our dear nation who are mourning the passing of this great martyr today, with their presence and their participation in mosques and on streets, we must join hands and thwart the evil plans of the enemies.
Iranian strikes across the Gulf region have also continued. Areas that host US military bases such as Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. But we are also seeing reports of civilian areas in those countries being hit. Hotels in Bahrain and, of course, in Dubai. We saw those flames emerging from the Fairmont Hotel at the Palm Jumeirah on Saturday afternoon there, local time. That is of clear concern that this is expanding to civilian sites. We've also seen damage to Dubai's main airport, a missile, or at least the remnants of a missile, landing on the concourse there. That will strengthen the resolve of these Gulf countries to stand up against Iran, but in terms of how they actually act more broadly than issuing statements of condemnation, that remains to be seen. Certainly their air defence systems are being tested by these barrages of missiles and drones. It'll be worth watching to see whether or not any other countries start to come to their defence, perhaps even Saudi Arabia as one of the major players in that region. There are people who are concerned that there is no off-ramp, if we want to use that sort of terminology here, that this war could drag on. Certainly there will be more sleepless nights across the Middle East as those barrages continue.
Well, Australians overseas should be prepared for serious travel disruptions in coming days due to the conflict. The government is updating travel advice and offering consular assistance. Political reporter Romy Stevens joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Romy, just how many Australians have been impacted by this?
Well, Gemma, the federal government estimates that there are around 115 Australians who are currently in the Middle East, so a significant number, but we know that many of them are unable to leave, mainly due to those widespread airspace closures across the region, which are impacting major transit hubs such as those at Doha, Abu Dhabi and Dubai. The government has also warned that road and land border closures could also impact movement. Now, it has opened up a registration portal for Australians who are in Iran and Israel and who are seeking to leave. Now, that's been opened since yesterday. We are yet to receive an update on how many Australians have so far registered via that portal, but it still is early days. Now, also, given the security concerns across the region, travel advice has also been updated to do not travel for many countries in the region. That includes Israel, Lebanon, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. Now, the Foreign Minister Penny Wong was earlier asked about efforts that the government is undertaking to help Australians in the region, and that includes whether or not repatriation flights are being considered. She says that the first priority is for the government to determine whether or not the airspace could open and commercial flights might resume, because she says that that will ensure, those commercial flights will ensure that Australians can get home much quicker. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
There are a lot of Australians in the region. Our first priority, my first priority, is to do everything we can to keep Australians safe. Obviously, it's very difficult at the moment for government to provide a great deal of assistance in circumstances where flights are being cancelled, disrupted and airspace is closed.
Romy, the federal government has thrown its support behind the US-Israeli action. What's its response been to questions about the legality of these strikes?
Well, Gemma, the government has really refused to buy into these questions around whether or not these US-Israeli strikes on Iran were illegal under international law. The Foreign Minister Penny Wong earlier said that it's up to the US and Israel to explain or speak to the legal basis for these attacks and to justify them. But the government has been criticised for its position here and for providing support to these strikes from a number of people. That includes the UN's Special Rapporteur on Human Rights, Ben Saul, who says that international lawyers are united in their findings that these strikes were illegal under international law because they weren't carried out in self-defence. Now, the Greens have also claimed that these strikes were illegal, while the opposition has thrown its support behind these attacks. So there is bipartisan support there from both the government and the opposition. Now, over recent days, the government has reiterated or made it clear that it wasn't involved in these attacks and it didn't provide practical support in the lead up to them or during them. And meanwhile, the Defence Minister, Richard Marles, he also spoke to media earlier and he says that a request for military support since the strikes were initially made, that hasn't been made, and he refused to speculate on whether or not Australia would provide support if asked to do so. Political reporter Romy Stevens joining us there from Parliament House. Thank you.
Well, international travellers have spent the night stranded at airports here and overseas due to flight cancellations. Max Tillman is at Sydney Airport and joins us now. Max, what can travellers expect today?
Good morning. Well, almost a dozen flights to and from the Middle East have been cancelled here at Sydney International Airport, although it really is nothing like the scenes that we saw transpiring from Saturday night when there were hundreds of travellers left in limbo here at Sydney Airport, laying wherever they could find a free spot in the hours after those escalating situations in the Middle East. And in fact, it was really that squeeze on Saturday evening into yesterday that saw hundreds of travellers effectively lying down wherever they could in Sydney's international terminal. We had the chance to speak to some of those travellers. Some of their major concerns were issues like the fact that travel insurance may not cover the cost of an armed conflict, which is something that the Australian Travel Industry Association has been asking prospective travellers to particularly look into, making sure that they're reading the fine print on their own travel insurance to ensure that they are covered for any of these potential cancellations. Another major concern for a lot of those travellers who were stranded in Sydney over the weekend was the fact that this happened to occur at the same time as Mardi Gras, which means that there was a particular squeeze on accommodation throughout the city. Let's take a quick listen to some of the frustrations and the anxieties that we heard over the weekend here at the airport.
So when we spoke to one representative, they said it was because of the situation in the UAE and that we would be escorted to collect our luggage. So we collected our luggage, which meant a massive queue in a hot tunnel for a while. Then we had to go through passport control, through immigration. When we got through to this side, there was nobody here. No representative from the airline, which is Qatar. And basically we've been in the airport ever since. There's no representative at all from Qatar. There's been no hotel organised, there's been no food, no drink, no reimbursements, nothing.
Now, today, some of those crowds have slowly abated, as you can expect. A lot of those who have had their flights cancelled due to that developing situation in the Middle East have naturally not arrived at the airport this morning. This is clearly a very fluid situation, and we are expecting to see the major airlines, particularly Emirates, Etihad and Qatar Airways, update travellers on the development of that air corridor in the Middle East throughout the next 24 hours. We understand that Etihad have suspended all flights to and from Dubai until 9 a.m. This morning, Eastern Standard Time. Emirates have suspended all flights to and from Dubai until 10 p.m. and we are expecting to also hear an update from the Qatari Civil Aviation Authority at about 5 p.m. this afternoon. So certainly a developing and fluid situation here at Sydney International Airport.
Max Tillman coming to us there from Sydney Airport. Thank you. And there is nervousness in global trading about what the Iranian conflict could mean for oil prices and the global economy. Joining me to discuss this is Radio National Breakfast Business and Economics correspondent Carrington Clark. Carrington, what has been the impact that we've seen so far?
Yeah, the most immediate impact was on the global oil price. We did see a spike, and that is not only fear of what happens to Iran's production of oil, it's a significant player in oil markets, produces about 3 to 4% of global supply. But more importantly is its strategic position and you'll hear about this a lot in coming days, the Strait of Hormuz, which separates Iran from Oman and the United Arab Emirates. Now, the reason it's so crucial is about 20 to 25% of global oil and global natural gas supply actually traverses that corridor. It's very narrow. It's only about 40 kilometres wide at its narrowest point. But more importantly, the shipping corridor, because of the size of these vessels, is only a few kilometres wide, which means it is vulnerable as a choke point. There have been reports of ships being hit by projectiles. It's unclear exactly what Iran wants to occur with that strait. There were reports Iran's Revolutionary Guards had got on the radio to order shipping companies to stay away from that strait and said that it was closed. That hasn't been officially confirmed by the regime. Iran also has an interest in keeping that corridor open because it does rely on the revenue it gets from selling its oil into global markets, particularly to China, which takes about 80% of its product. So it has an interest in keeping the production going, keeping the shipping corridor open, but it also is a way of them creating pain for adversaries. So we shall see exactly how that will play out. Shipping companies themselves are making their own assessment, though. Obviously, they're interested in their assets being safe, their personnel being safe. So we've seen a drastic decline in how many ships are passing through that strait, down perhaps 70% already. So the question is, how long will this conflict continue and when can that be restored? Some analysts are already suggesting we could see major rises in the cost of oil if this doesn't come to an end quickly. So that's one we're keeping an eye on. Obviously, with the scenes we're seeing in airports here in Australia, that's been playing out in the Middle East. Aviation companies are being hurt. This obviously also hurts the tourism industry in that region. So there's a lot of different factors at play here. But really, I think that the major issue for analysts at the moment is about how long this conflict continues on so that we can assess exactly what the impact is going to be.
Carrington, which countries are most financially vulnerable here?
Yeah, I think you can break it up into a few different categories. Obviously, those countries that are geographically close to Iran are most immediately vulnerable. We've seen the impact already on the United Arab Emirates, hitting the tourism industry, shutting down travel effectively to that region. But then there are also those countries that are most closely aligned. I spoke about China, its reliance on Iranian oil. But the real risk globally is that if we see a prolonged period of high prices for oil, that will feed into higher global inflation. We could see an outbreak of inflationary pressures, and that makes it a much more complicated picture for central banks around the world on how to contain it. Donald Trump suggesting this could be a 4-week campaign. We know historically these things can get out of control very quickly. And although markets were expecting some sort of conflict, given the build-up of American military strength in the region, I think the size of these strikes has caught many people unaware. And now, of course, that risk of further escalation, of whether or not we will see Iran and the United States and Israel back off, or whether or not you're going to see further escalation if they look for full-scale regime change. So for Australia, where we are relatively isolated from this conflict, our aviation companies are impacted, obviously. There are Australian companies involved in oil and gas production. They might actually see a rise in value as people bet on oil prices staying higher for longer. But we are not completely immune to what happens over in that region, and global inflationary pressures could also impact Australia as well. So this is one to keep an eye on for us here. Obviously, most immediately impacts those people who have been stranded or had holiday plans interrupted. But we will be watching this carefully. I know the Reserve Bank will be watching this carefully to see what this might mean, particularly when it comes to inflationary pressures.
Carrington Clark, Radio National Breakfast Business and Economics Correspondent. Thank you. As resignations, arrests and embarrassments continue from the release of the Epstein files, a new documentary from ABC News examines the biggest revelation so far and explains how it came to this. Reporter Grace Tobin has been on the ground speaking with those closest to this case as the files dropped. And she joins us now. Grace, who have you interviewed for this documentary and what have you discovered?
Well, Gemma, I have been on the ground in the United States since the week that the first lot of the files dropped, and speaking with those closest to this story right from that moment all the way through to very recent revelations. And, you know, that includes survivors from Florida and New York, people from Epstein's camp, including his younger brother Mark, his most recent lawyer, and also the forensic pathologist, the independent pathologist who attended the autopsy of Epstein in his very controversial death. Then there's the key politicians who got this bill passed, as well as journalists who broke this story open some years ago. Now, I guess what they have done is really provided insight into how utterly obsessed the American public is with the Epstein files and why. And I guess what I've learned really is that to understand how big this story has become, you really have to realise how the files fit into Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, and then how the justice system in the United States failed to protect children and the sexual abuse of children.
What do you think have been the most shocking files to come out so far?
Look, I think, like everyone, I'm waking up every day and there are more and more revelations coming out. The journalists and the public around the world are still sifting through these millions of files, and so we continue to see so many shocking revelations. I guess there's not necessarily one in particular. I think for me it's the collective emails that have come out that expose the many, many powerful elite people around the world who were in contact, close contact with Jeffrey Epstein even after his conviction in 2008 when he became a registered sex offender. I think that really it has lifted the lid on a truly spectacular network of global elites that Epstein had embedded himself with. And in this documentary, we explore how these people, some of them turned a blind eye to his offending and why.
And why do you think the Epstein files continue to haunt Donald Trump, especially now that millions of files have been released?
Well, look, I mean, what people kept telling me throughout this documentary was that Donald Trump really stoked this fire with his MAGA supporters during his re-election campaign. But then once he became president, it became, there's nothing to see here, there's no client list, this is all a hoax. And it just made everyone, particularly his own supporters, more and more suspicious and desperate to see the files. Now, as you say, even with the release of 3.5 million documents, there are still millions that are being withheld by the Department of Justice, and Americans aren't getting the transparency that they expected and still demand.
Reporter Grace Tobin, thank you.
Thank you.
And it is time to check in on the weather now with Nate Byrne. Morning, Nate. I know it was a weekend of flooding rain for many. Is it bucketing down?
It certainly still is, Gemma. Morning. Oh, and also it's a pretty big weekend for me as well with Mardi Gras. So apologies for my voice. Still struggling a little bit. Sydney may have recovered. I haven't quite yet. But weather-wise, yeah, we've seen literally 100 millimetres plus through large parts of eastern South Australia, Victoria, particularly in the northwest, and then for southwest and New South Wales. And it continues this morning very much. We've still got warnings on, though they have now been cancelled through South Australia, but still a large swathe of western, southwestern New South Wales, almost all of northern central and northwestern Victoria, looking at more heavy to intense rainfall through the day today. We've still got some potential for really big falls, all thanks to a low pressure system that's, well, I think it's been a couple of weeks we've been talking about this one system now. It's really been persistent. By the way, I've also got some warnings just up in Queensland's northeast around Cardwell. Some heavy rainfall up there, again thanks to a low pressure system with an associated trough. But they're different. It's somewhat connected because, you know, it's tropical moisture that's feeding down into the southeast. You've been feeling how muggy it's been. I'm keeping an eye on the tropics because they're very active right now. This low pressure system, though, in the southeast is being dragged slowly eastwards. So we're going to see that rain drying up pretty quickly behind as a high pressure ridge comes in and provides a bit of drier air that actually kept the rainfall from places like Adelaide. We haven't seen the big totals we could have seen there because that dry air just intruded a little bit too much and kept the heaviest of the rainfall off. But we've seen plenty of severe thunderstorms bringing heavy falls, and there are more on the way today, especially pushing up into New South Wales. The north, as I say, stays very active as well. We're looking at the potential for more flash flooding out of this, and we've got widespread flooding, including a few gauges at major flood levels in Queensland's west. So we're talking the Georgina and Eyre Creek, both really, really high and rising at the moment. And that's the case for so many rivers through the eastern interior. Water's on the way up, Gemma. We've finally had a drop of summer rain. It just, unfortunately, was a little bit more than we probably needed.
Yeah, and a lot to watch there. What does the rest of the week have in store?
Well, I reckon come tomorrow, we should be done with that low pressure system. I mean, we'll still be feeling the effects of the rain for a little while, but the circulation that marks that low should deteriorate. So instead, I'm going to be watching lows up north. How many do we want? One tropical low that could go to tropical cyclone strength? 2? 3? How about 4? Most of them not going to be a problem like this one out here, but we're keeping a close eye on a couple that could cause us a little bit of a headache. Only a moderate chance of seeing any cyclone development at this stage, which is good news, but there is one up in the Gulf of Carpentaria that's going to enhance falls across the north there. And you can still see we've got a decent drop still to come out of this low that's bothering the southeast. Probably not as much rainfall as we've had so far, but still some significant rainfall for the southeast ahead.
Yeah. All right, Nate, can you take us around the states?
Sure, let's do it. We'll start in Queensland, where the wet and stormy weather continues, as I say, through the west and the southwest, with that flooding going on. That is a major concern. Across the north too, and the monsoon is bringing some heavier rain to the very top of the peninsula and for Torres Strait as well. We've also got showers for the east coast, south of about Bowen, including you, Brisbane. Just a chance of a couple of drops at least. 29 will be your top. In New South Wales, we've got, well, very wet weather almost across the board. So wet and stormy conditions getting in through the west, and places like the Riverina could see big totals. In the east, some showers as well, around the northeast, the southeast, and then a few drops in between. So Sydney just getting a shower or two. It's a top of 27 today. Canberra, rain for you. It's increasing as well. 31 will be your top. In Victoria, it looks very, very wet here, but it's already starting to dry up from the west as this rain pushes through into eastern parts of the state. 23 for Melbourne, a wet start, yes, but I reckon it'll dry up after lunch. Pretty much the same for Tassie. Rain to start, all clearing as we go through this afternoon. It's getting to 25 in Hobart. You're looking pretty soggy, and we've got some storms around in the mix too. In South Australia, the rain's done with now for the most part. You might still see a couple of drops here and there in the far east, and maybe a couple along the coast too. Adelaide's staying fine. It's cloudy, and we've had road weather alerts around the Adelaide Hills this morning. 25 the top for the city. Meanwhile, over in WA, southern parts, completely clear underneath that high. Perth's getting to 30 degrees, but look further north. We'll keep an eye, by the way, on heat gathering through western parts and northwestern WA. But then from the north of the Pilbara up, we've got wet and stormy weather, and pretty much right across the territory as well. For Darwin, just some showers today, Gemma. It's going to get more active in the coming days, though. It's a top of 31.
Thanks, Nate. This is ABC News. I'm Gemma Veness, and these are the top stories we're following this morning. US President Donald Trump says US military attacks on Iran will continue until all objectives are achieved. He's described the strikes as one of the largest and most complex military offences the world has seen. The Pentagon has confirmed 3 US service members have been killed, and there will likely be more American casualties. More than 100,000 Australians are stranded in the Middle East. Iran, Iraq, Israel, Syria, Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates have all restricted their airspace. Dozens of flights between Australia, the Middle East and Europe have been cancelled. The government is waiting to see if commercial flights resume before considering repatriations. Last month's interest rate rise has not cooled Australia's housing market, with new data showing property prices in mid-sized capital cities still rising. Perth led the charge, while Brisbane and Adelaide also grew. Prices in Sydney and Melbourne remain flat due to a stronger supply of new listings. The Matildas have made a winning start to their Women's Asian Cup campaign with a 1-0 win over the Philippines at Perth Stadium. A goal from Sam Kerr in the 14th minute proved to be the winner. Australia is next in action on Thursday, taking on Iran on the Gold Coast. The war between the US and Iran is rapidly evolving. Let's recap now the latest developments in the region. The US and Israel have struck key Iranian military assets, striking an underground missile site and the country's naval base. There's been confirmation of casualties of 3 US troops in the operation. Donald Trump saying there will likely be more. The president says he will avenge all American soldiers killed. Iran has struck 3 US and UK oil tankers off the coast of Oman, with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard saying ships are no longer allowed to use the Hormuz Strait. The strikes have continued across the region, one hitting the Israeli town of Beit Shemesh, killing 9 people. A pro-Iranian group based in Iraq has struck a US military base in the Iraqi Kurdish area of Erbil. Airspace surrounding Iran and the Gulf states remains closed, stranding travellers worldwide. Iran will set up a transition council to oversee the election of a new leader following the death of Ayatollah Khamenei. Britain, France and Germany all say they are ready to work with the US and partners to help stop Iran's retaliatory attacks. Leaders have issued a joint statement saying they are appalled by Iran's reckless strikes on their allies. Now, Foreign Minister Penny Wong says Australia has not been involved in the operation and has not been speaking with her US counterpart. She's reiterated support for actions that would stop Iran obtaining nuclear weapons, but wouldn't be drawn on the legal basis of the US-Israeli attacks.
We are not central to these issues in the Middle East. We understand the reasons for the actions that have been taken, and we support action to ensure Iran does not ever obtain a nuclear weapon. One of the distinctions between Iraq and now is that we are not participating in these strikes. That's the first point I'd make. The second is what I've said, is that the legal basis of this is for the United States and Israel to explain.
The fast-moving events in Iran could mark a major turning point for the Middle East and the world. Here's a quick look at how the attack unfolded over the weekend. The first reports of explosions in Tehran came in at about 5:30 Saturday afternoon, Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Israel confirmed it had launched what it called a preventative missile attack against Iran. One strike happened near the offices of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The Israeli military triggered sirens across its territory, warning residents to prepare for a possible missile attack in retaliation. A word then came through that the operation was coordinated with the United States. The US president confirmed that the US had begun major combat operations in Iran. The mission was codenamed Epic Fury.
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world.
Later, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a video statement outlining his reasons for the attack, saying it should allow the Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. As events were playing out, multiple airlines scrambled to reroute flights as neighbouring nations closed their airspace. Shortly before 9 p.m, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, loud booms were heard in Abu Dhabi. Several Gulf states came under attack from Iranian missiles. Multiple blasts were reported in several countries, including Bahrain. Tehran revealed it considered all US and Israeli assets dotted across the region as legitimate military targets. On Sunday morning here, reports emerged the supreme leader had been killed in the strikes. People came out to mourn on the streets in Tehran as Israel said Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's compound had been destroyed. Later, the US president confirmed the death of Ali Khamenei, who he described as one of the most evil people in history. By lunchtime in Australia, his death was tearfully announced on Iranian state media.
After a lifetime of Husseini struggle, unceasing and untiring, with a lofty and celestial spirit like the steadfast mountain of guardianship, the compassionate father of kindness and resolve, the leader and imam of the Muslims, His Eminence Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Hosseini Khamenei, on the path of upholding the exaltation of the sacred sanctuary of the Islamic Republic of Iran, drank the sweet, pure drought of martyrdom and joined the supreme heavenly kingdom.
The British Prime Minister has released a video statement announcing that the UK has agreed to a US request to use British military bases for defensive strikes on Iranian missile sites. But Keir Starmer said the UK had learned lessons from the mistakes of Iraq and was not involved in the initial strikes on Iran and will not join offensive action now.
Our partners in the Gulf have asked us to do more to defend them, and it is my duty to protect British lives. We have British jets in the air as part of coordinated defensive operations, which have already successfully intercepted Iranian strikes. But the only way to stop the threat is to destroy the missiles at source, in their storage depots, or the launchers which are used to fire the missiles. The United States has requested permission to use British bases for that specific and limited defensive purpose. We have taken the decision to accept this request to prevent Iran firing missiles across the region, killing innocent civilians, putting British lives at risk, and hitting countries that have not been involved. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region. And we will also bring experts from Ukraine together with our own experts to help Gulf partners shoot down Iranian drones attacking them. I want to be very clear. We all remember the mistakes of Iraq, and we have learned those lessons. We were not involved in the initial strikes on Iran, and we will not join offensive action now.
Financial markets are bracing for the impact of Iran closing off the Strait of Hormuz, a vital route for the world's oil supply. Australia is particularly vulnerable to any global shock because of our low reserves. Now, to discuss this, we are joined by Sol Kavonik, Head of Energy Research at MST Financial. Sol, thank you for your time. What are we anticipating in terms of oil prices in the near future, and why is that?
Well, we're going to see oil prices spike after the breakout of the war over the weekend, and the big question that will be assessed in markets is how high will things go over the course of the next few days and few weeks. As you say, the Strait of Hormuz is a key choke point for global energy supply chains. About 20% of the world's oil and also 20% of the world's LNG have to pass through this strait in order to reach markets all around the world. And what we've seen since the conflict broke out is already tanker traffic through this strait has dropped to a trickle, as quite understandably tankers are seeing a conflict situation and not wanting to go through there. The question now is, will the US and its allies be able to secure passage, for example, via having accompanying escorts of these tankers through this strait? If they cannot restore all or close to all of the passage through this strait, then we're looking at significant disruptions to both, it's in a double whammy, both oil and global gas supply at the same time. And to give a bookend impact, if there was a full closure of the Strait of Hormuz, we're talking about an impact on the energy markets which would be many times the size of what we saw in the wake of the Ukraine war in 2022, and over 3 times the size of what we saw in the last true global energy crisis in the 1970s in the wake of the Arab oil embargo and the Iranian revolution. So that could create not just a global energy crisis, but a global economic crisis, and this is what the Trump administration and allies around the world are wanting to avoid. To date, there's not been any attacks directly on export infrastructure, but we have seen some attacks on some tankers and Iran threatening passage through the strait. And so the next few days and seeing if we manage to restore that passage is going to be critical for oil prices and hence our cost of living here home in Australia as well.
And so, of course, markets look at risk, but fair to say this was bigger and or faster than most expected. And there's a lot of uncertainty now, and markets do not like uncertainty.
That's right. So oil prices were already about $5 to $10 a barrel higher leading into the weekend on the potential for strikes. But now that the strikes have actually happened and the scope of the strikes have ended up at the more severe end of what expectations were, that is going to see oil prices spike further. You add in the fact that Iran's retaliation has been widespread, targeting both military but also a lot of civilian assets across multiple Gulf countries. Keep in mind, many of these Gulf countries, including Iraq, the UAE and Saudi, are big oil producers themselves, and they could be drawn more directly into this conflict. It just raises the risk profile of both deliberate but also mistaken or accidental escalation, which could then see a conflagration directly impact oil and gas exports to the world.
Bringing it back here to Australia, why are we vulnerable in this situation, and what might happen here?
Well, Australia's connected to global oil markets. Nearly all of our oil that we use is ultimately imported. Australia produces very little of its own oil these days anymore, so we're completely dependent on these global markets, which are all interconnected. And that flows not just through to our prices at the pump when we fill up our car and our electricity prices, but it flows through to the cost of goods for almost everything that we use. And so it's going to place, actually, if this is a prolonged conflict with a prolonged impact on supply, that's going to have a persistent impact on our cost of living here and therefore our economy.
Getting back to that point about uncertainty, depending on how this plays out, could we longer term actually see oil prices go down?
Well, this is what is most interesting. Now, obviously, still a lot of pieces have to fall into place, but if the US is actually successful here in implementing a regime change to a more moderate government in Iran, which is more welcomed by the international community, that could see a lot of investment return. And Iran has some of the best and cheapest oil and gas in the world. And if you actually started to see investment return into Iran over the medium to longer term, that could put a significant downward pressure on our energy costs and make our energy security around the world much, much better. Now, again, a lot of water to go under the bridge before that happens, but there is some potential silver lining from an energy security perspective if there's a positive, constructive outcome that comes out of this in the end.
Sol Kavonik, Head of Energy Research at MST Financial. Great to get your insights on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it is time to check in on all the sport now with Catherine Murphy. Kath, we will of course start with the Matildas. It was a great night for Sam Kerr and the Matildas.
Yes, it certainly was. Good morning to you, Gemma. Good morning to you at home. In case you missed it, the Matildas have made a winning start to their Asian Cup campaign. They managed a 1-0 win over the Philippines at Perth Stadium. And as you said, who else would it be to score that goal other than the one and only Sam Kerr in the 14th minute? Her header proved to be the winner. And would you believe it, Gemma? It is her first international goal since November 2023. And it was scored in front of almost 45,000 fans. Australia is next in action on Thursday, taking on Iran on the Gold Coast. But so good to see Sam Kerr back on the field, scoring goals for her country. There was a lot of debate about her fitness. There's even been debate as to whether she should be the captain. By the way, not on this show, not on the ABC, but a lot of talk around her. And what better way to put yourself in the headlines than scoring the winner? Here's what Sam Kerr had to say about hers and the Matildas' performance.
Obviously, on a personal level, scoring my first goal back in a while, and then I thought everyone stuck together, everyone just kept going. It was a bit of a tough game, stop-starty, and then I think at the end there, Mary coming on was obviously really nice. So there was a few team positives and a few personal positives, but the most important thing is that we got the win and everyone stuck together.
It is important, but as she mentioned, Mary Fowler back on the field in around the 67th minute, Gemma. Honestly, what a joy to see them both back.
Yes, we were spoiled. Now, speaking of sporting legends, Elisa Healy also had a big Sunday.
She had a massive Sunday, so she made a record-breaking 158 in what was her final appearance for Australia in a one-day international, leading her side to a huge 185-run win over India in Hobart. That is the highest score by an Australian woman in an ODI on home soil. Belinda Clark did get a higher score. That was overseas in Denmark, I think, off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure, Gemma. But that mammoth win means the Aussies have secured a clean sweep in that ODI series. They now lead the multi-format series with the test match still to come. But Alyssa Healy, just a legend. What a way for her to go out. Like, talk about going out on top, Gemma. I can only hope that we do the same one day.
Yeah, indeed. And Kath, in Formula One, there is uncertainty regarding the travel movements of teams due to this conflict in the Middle East.
There really is, Gemma. So this morning we've had a fresh statement from the Australian Grand Prix Corporation. They have moved to reassure everyone that it is going to be okay. They are saying that they've been reassured by Formula One management that they're working through all the travel arrangements for the drivers, for the teams, because there are hundreds of Formula One staff that are due to fly through the Middle East. Some of them are already there and they need to make their way to Australia for the Grand Prix at Albert Park this week. Now, this is quite triggering. Remember 2020 when the Australian Grand Prix was cancelled on the first day of the event? Now, very different circumstances. That was due to COVID, but it certainly brings back a lot of memories. Now, when I say there's uncertainty, that is because I'm hearing from at least one team, Gemma, that they're worried about travel movements. It's making it all very difficult. A lot of the paddock yet to arrive in Australia. Some teams, their drivers are already here, or maybe they're media teams, but they're waiting on their engineers, they're waiting on their staff, they're waiting on machinery. And we did have the cancellation of a Pirelli tyres event. That was supposed to be over 2 days over the weekend in the Middle East. That was cancelled. There will be an impact, and we're going to stay on this story this week, Gemma.
Catherine, thank you.
Thank you.
And it's time to check in on the weather. Here's Nate Byrne.
G'day, Gemma. The rain is still coming down through the southeastern interior of the country, courtesy of a low that's been hanging around. Well, it was causing heavy rainfall through central Australia all last week. Now it's been drawn into the southeast, western parts of New South Wales, the southwest of the state, and much of northern Victoria, looking at the potential for more heavy, perhaps intense rainfall through the day today that could lead to flash flooding, more riverine rises. I've also got some warnings up in the northeast of Queensland, around Cardwell. Some heavy falls there too. In both cases, we're talking about lows with associated troughs. They're separate, but they're both connected to the tropics, and that's what's fueling the big falls we're expecting to see through the day today. Actually, I'm watching the tropics because we've got several lows. There's actually another one starting to form over in the west as well, perhaps two. So we've got a very active week ahead, and we're starting it with plenty of thunderstorm activity through the eastern interior. Severe cells may be bringing heavy falls. The north is getting a drenching too. The monsoon's looking pretty active. Northern Queensland certainly feeling that. Plenty more rainfall to come today and in the days ahead, but that low in the southeast should start to wash out as we get into tomorrow. It'll leave some showers here and there, but then we'll watch for circulations developing through the tropics, all of them looking like a low to moderate chance of intensification to cyclone strength, but we could be talking about multiple cyclones later on in the week. One in the Gulf of Carpentaria is certainly going to enhance falls across the top end in the coming days. For now, though, it's looking like it's going to be pretty soggy for parts of the east coast, although it's just a possible shower if you're in Brisbane today. 29 degrees will be the top. Further south, Sydney, you've got a shower or two. You managed to get away with it for most of the weekend, but there's some wet weather on the way. 27 will be your maximum. Rain increasing in Canberra, 21 there. Melbourne's been feeling the rain this morning. I reckon we're only a few hours away from being on the tail end of it. It's aiming for 23 degrees in the city. Rain in Hobart as well, 25 there. Still feeling pretty muggy. Over in Adelaide, things have dried up now. Cloudy and 25 for the city. Perth's aiming for 30. It's clear blue skies there, and up top 30 in Darwin as well. Gemma, just a shower or two on the forecast.
Thanks, Nate. And we have more on the ABC News app and on ABC iView. I'm Gemma Veness, and coming up on the ABC News channel, we are expecting a motion in the Senate to censure Pauline Hanson for those recent comments about Muslims. We'll aim to bring you those developments live when it gets underway, so stay with us.